Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are in the world, and welcome to the Crush the Quo webinar. In today's webinar, we are going to be discussing how to recession-proof your sales with Mark Roberts. Mark is a senior level sales and marketing leader with many years, over 35 years of experience in driving profitable sales growth in market-leading organizations, such as Timken, VMI, Gardner, Denver, Mobility Works, and of course, everyone will definitely know Frito-Lay. Mark is also an accomplished author, public speaker, trainer, and sales coach. And today, as I've said, Mark is going to be talking about how to recession-proof your sales, specifically providing some practical steps that you can take to opt out of the recession and grow when your competitors might actually be experiencing a decline. So with that, I'm now going to hand over to Mark. Thank you very much. Mark, over to you.
Well, thank you. And again, I'm looking forward to our discussion today. And I just spoke at an event last week in San Diego called SAMA, which is Strategic Account Management Association. And I would say about half the room was still experiencing really strong sales like they did last year. And then half was starting to feel a little bit of a slowdown. They think something's happening, but they really can't quantify it. So what I want to do today is, again, my name's Mark Roberts. Sometimes I use my middle name, which is Mark Allen Roberts. And the reason I do that is, if you've ever Googled your name, Mark Roberts is the world's most famous streaker, and I don't want to be known as that. But on this slide, you can get a hold of me. If you Google fix sales problems, typically my website comes up #1. But I also have, LinkedIn profile. I try to put something out of use every week on LinkedIn. And again, I really enjoy connecting with people on LinkedIn. How can we recession-proof your business? That's the question, right? Like I said, some people are starting to feel things getting a little bit slower. One of the things I have all my sales teams doing as a coach right now is doing what I call a pipeline audit. I'm asking them to call all those accounts that they're counting on to come in for them this year and make sure that what they ordered in the system is still going to happen. Unfortunately, what we're finding is when people do that, in most cases, the numbers have changed. Either they're reducing what they need or they're pushing orders out. One of my clients just did this, and they had a pretty healthy sales pipeline of about $10 million in January. And after doing the audit in 30 days, that number dropped by 3.5 million. What we saw during COVID, post-COVID, with all the supply chain constraints, is buyers were kind of in a panic mode, and they were overbuying and they were over projecting, just trying to get whatever they needed. And now as things slow down, their demand has slowed down, and their CFOs are saying, look, let's slow down, let's focus on cash. So they're burning through their inventory. So what can we do to recession-proof our business? Well, the first thing we can do is look at what happened the last time there was a recession. I find it funny when I speak at events and I ask the audience, how many of you have been through a recession? And it surprises me how many have not. In the last recession, 75% of businesses experienced a decline in revenue. And at the end, I'm going to actually give you a link to that article. But 14% actually saw accelerated growth. And of those 14%, they grew 9%. So the question is, how do we become a 14%er? No matter what's happening in the economic world and with all the world uncertainty that we're seeing right now, how do we continue to grow our businesses profitably and scale? What did the 14% of companies do? The main thing they did was had a plan. They looked at various trigger events and scenarios, and they created a plan. They created cross-functional empowered teams so they could be nimble and they could make the moves they need to make. Companies that are reactionary during economic crisis or economic slowdowns typically take months, maybe even a quarter, to realize what's happening. And then they ask permission all the way up to the CEO. That might take another 60 days. and all of a sudden 5-6 months have passed with declining revenue. These teams didn't let that happen. They had cross-functional empowered teams, and they were able to make the strategic pivots that they needed to make when they needed to make them. They focused on customers, segmentation, and retention. Part of my practice is doing voice of customer research. And right now there's a great degree of uncertainty out there among customers as well. And whenever uncertainty happens, they get nervous and they slow down. We want to make sure that we understand who our customers are. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later as far as what I call ABC customers, knowing who your top customers are, your middle and their smaller customers, and making sure we have the right terms of trade based on who they are. And don't panic. I still have clients that are suffering from overreacting during COVID. So what we want to do is make decisions based on data and trends in the market and not just emotion. They want to improve marketing. The teams that excelled in the last recession doubled down on marketing, that digital footprint. Before we started, we were starting to talk about the impact AI is having. But what we all need to do is understand that in most cases, 70 to 80% of the buying process is over before a customer actually speaks with one of your salespeople. So the quickest way to be feeling like a pushy salesperson is to not understand where the buyer is in that journey. Have the right structure, training, and skills by role. I can't emphasize this enough. My new friend from South Africa and I both have a passion for improving sales effectiveness. We could talk for hours about what we see, but I just helped a team. They have over 150 sales representatives here in the United States. And about 20% of the people on their team don't even want to be in sales. So we shouldn't be surprised that the results really aren't what we hoped they would be. There's a great quote, I'm sure everybody's heard it, by Wayne Gretzky, which is a good hockey player, plays where the puck is, but a great player plays where the puck is gonna be. I think a lot of people have heard that quote, but when I looked into it a little bit deeper, what it turns out is Wayne used to watch a lot of hockey as a little boy in Canada, but the difference is he would have a pad of paper in front of him, and he would draw the patterns that the puck would make. And they're estimating he did this over 10,000 times. So it's no wonder he could predict where the puck was heading. And that's what this is about. Everybody on this call pretty much knows some of the common things that happen when the business slows down. We kind of know where the puck is going. So what do we do based on what we understand will happen? Number one, we said, was a plan. Develop a plan based on significant, specific scenario triggers. One of my clients is doing it based on AR. If their accounts receivable exceeds X amount of days past 15 days, then their plan is going to kick in. Some people are looking at their sales pipeline. If my pipeline reduces below X, the plan will kick in. What are some trigger events that you all might be tracking? You could just put it into the chat if you'd like. What are some trigger events that might make you feel like you're heading into an economic slowdown in your business? Like I said,
one would be that customers, because of their triggers, that has a downstream impact on us.
Yes.
Maybe less projects or even projects going away.
Going away, being pushed out. I had a client last week. They had a very large retail customer push out orders for 6 months just because of the uncertainty. But what are those trigger events that typically in your Monday meetings or whenever your team gets together that would indicate that an economic slowdown is happening? We got to know what the right levers are that we have at our disposal. And then there's something called the power of one that we're going to talk about at the end, that every plan needs to include because it focuses on cash flow.
So we have one comment in the chat there, Mark, from Ethne. They work on events. So indeed, events, being pushed out is a bit trigger.
Well, the good news with events is I've never seen so much attendance. I think we mentioned when we opened this up, I do quite a bit of speaking. whether it's keynotes, sales kickoffs. A lot of times it's workshops. I'm going to be up in Canada for 4 days in a couple of weeks doing workshops. But the events might be slowing down, but the attendance is greater than we've ever seen. I think people are very anxious to be out seeing people again. But I have a question for everybody. What percent of CEOs believe we will experience a recession? What do you think? Is it A, 10%, B, 40%, C, 78%, or D? 96% of CEOs surveyed. Which one is it that you believe? Just type it into the chat.
So we have C coming in a couple of times. C, a lot of C's.
Interesting. When they asked this question 6 months ago, the answer was C. But then they did the survey again, and now it's 96%. So that's an awfully big number of CEOs that are starting to feel some of the trigger events that the economy is slowing down. So how would your sales volume react should we see a slowdown? Would it be A, you'd see a decrease significantly, more than 10%, B, pretty much remain the same, C, increase but under 10%, or increase over 10%? Maybe you're blessed to be in one of those recession-proof businesses, like my clients in defense or medical supply. They can't keep up right now, no matter what the economy is doing. What are you guys seeing?
So we have one person that said A.
Yep. Which shouldn't surprise us when 75% of businesses saw a revenue decline last time. Now, my favorite question, one of my favorite questions in this deck is, okay, so 90-some% of CEOs believe we're going to go into a recession. How many of them have a plan should we see an economic slowdown? Do you think it was A, 14%, B, 22%, C, 47%, or D, 65%? What do you feel the CEOs that you know and you work with would have answered?
We've got an A, we've got a B. Whatever it is, it's probably surprisingly low, right, Mark?
Yeah, it is. Unfortunately, it's A.
Wow.
So talk about a pretty big disconnect. 90-some%, 6% or whatever, believe we're going to see a recession, but only 14% have a plan. So what are the rest going to do? Are they going to wait and see? What we found in the last recession, the teams that waited to see what would happen are the ones that really saw revenue decline. So the challenge is, how do we create that plan? Well, I love this quote. When it comes to cash, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. The shame is, though, a lot of teams that I work with, other than the senior leadership team, really don't understand cash and how critical cash is and how their role creates cash for the business. I just finished my second book, and in there I talk about, how many businesses start up, how many businesses fail after 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and the leading reason why businesses struggle is cash. So we really need to help improve those business acumen skills of our team, particularly on how they impact cash. Because growing a profitable business, we need to increase profit, cash, and value. Every business owner wants to improve, but how do you achieve this and drive your strategy to become, one of those strong companies? And once you understand that code on how to do it, make sure that it's part of your management process. It's things that we talk about every week, sometimes every day. Some of my clients have what we call daily huddles, stand-up meetings where we only, literally we don't sit down. We talk for, 5 to 15 minutes. Everybody understands what they're going to achieve today, and then we move on. But we've got to start having these discussions about things that matter. Teams that survived and did really well and thrived in the last recession were focused and aligned. Again, when we work with sales teams, we assess their skills. But one of the things we look at is, are they aligned? Are they aligned with the senior VP, their manager? But also when we work with other teams in general, is the leadership team aligned? And you'd be surprised how often the answer is no. On a team of 5 to 7, typically there's 1 to 2 people who either don't understand the plan or don't agree with it. And there's something that we call shadow of the leader. Whatever area that person is in charge of will suffer if the leader doesn't believe in and is not aligned with the plan. And then there's knowing the score. How are we doing? Every one of my clients, I'm a huge advocate of putting up the score everywhere. Most of my clients are in the manufacturing space, and we put up things on the shop floor. We put up things in the office. We have dashboards. There's no mystery on how we're doing at any moment in time. And then cash flow. Understand what cash flow is impacted by. Obviously, marketing. What you charge for your products, your sales volume, your overhead, and your receivables. Operations, purchasing, inventory, work in process, your utilization and efficiency and overhead. Finance, receivables, payables. Your team needs to understand how they impact cash. It'd be a really good exercise even at your next manager's meeting just to sit down and say, let's talk about from the day raw material comes into our business to when we collect cash, what does that look like? And where does your role impact that? There's something called the power of one, and it's a code your business can use to improve profit, cash flow, and add value. And there's 7 levers. We talked about knowing the levers. There's 7 levers. Obviously, there's pricing. I was very fortunate to help a company that did strategic pricing and work with their analysts and really understand how to improve overall profitability by focusing on some of those levers. There's sales volume. Believe it or not, like we said, 14% of companies actually grew in the last recession. There's cost of goods, right? One of my clients right now, I had just trained their salespeople on negotiating skills. And the CEO reached out and he says, would you mind training our purchasing people? Because right now is a great time. We're sending communication out to all vendors, just saying, look, we want to update our records. What are your costs at your pricing as of today? And then when that returns, we've trained and coached their purchasing people on how to negotiate better prices. Make sure you have the right overhead. Understand your accounts receivable, understand your inventory and your work in process, and understand your accounts payable. Those are your main levers, right, that impact your cash. So let's take a look at price. It's interesting how much time we spend on costs, right? Most of my clients are, like I said, manufacturing companies. And I don't know how many hours or days they spend on cost. What does it cost us to make this? What does it cost us to design and produce this? But we really don't spend nearly as much time on price. And price is one of the most critical levers in our businesses. Each one of my accounts here in the States had multiple price increases last year, so much so that I actually created a course on how to deliver price increases that stick. But price is absolutely critical. One of the things we recommend is conduct what we call a net profit by customer analysis. A lot of clients have profit by customer, but they haven't added in the cost of sale. So once we do that, we pick maybe 7 to 12 of the top costs of sale, and we add that in, and then we calculate net profit by customer. When we do so, what we'll find is about 20% of your customers are generating 200% of your profits. That's usually where somebody in the audience raises their hand and says, look, I can tell you're a sales guy. You don't understand numbers. No, just hang with me for a minute. What I'll do is let me move to the next slide. 20% generate about 200% of your profit. These are your ideal customers after you add the cost of sale. 60% of your customers typically break even when you add in the cost of sale. And the scary number is 20% of your customers lose about 50% of those profits you work so hard to get after you add the costs of sale. So what we recommend is we run that net profit by customer analysis. And first, let's identify who our ideal customers are and make sure that we take really good care of those, what I would call A customers. Let's figure out how we could get some of those break-even accounts more profitable. And then let's really focus on those profit leaking accounts, particularly when there's supply chain constraints. One of my clients actually did some analysis, and they found that it cost them $110 to take an order, process it, print it, pick it, and ship it. So once we had that data, what we found was they were processing way too many small orders. So we took corrective action. Sometimes corrective action is a price increase. I was surprised when inflation hit how many clients had not done price increases for years. But there's also terms of trade. You know, what are all the costs that you're putting into serving that client? Maybe that client would be better served as an online customer, and reducing some of those field expenses. But again, we really want to take a data-driven approach. And then there's sales volume. How do we increase overall sales volume, but at a profitable level? Question for you. In a typical 1-hour meeting with buyers, Florida State did a study. How many minutes were valuable to the buyer? What would you say that number was? How many minutes in a 60-minute meeting with a buyer were valuable to the buyer? What do you think that number was?
We have 15, we have 8, we have 20, we have 10, we have 4. I would have gone with the 4 as well.
Yeah, it's like an arrow to my heart because I love doing sales training. 6 minutes.
6 minutes.
6 minutes were valuable to the buyers on average. The vast majority of the meeting wasn't useful. And it's what I refer to as pitch slapping, right? The salesperson shows up, they start pitching. They start pitching without asking any questions. They're not having any conversation. And, you know, there's a term on the internet, if you're curious, called gobbledygook. And if you look it up, it's the stuff that everybody says that really doesn't mean anything anymore. We have the best quality. We're the largest, whatever. We're the only person that does. None of that is of value. What buyers want and need is the stuff that's not on your website. They want insights. They want business consultants masquerading as salespeople, right? So that was kind of a disturbing number. And the question is, you know, that's where we have to look inward a little bit and reflect. I wonder how many minutes when my salespeople meet with customers are valuable. And that's one of the questions we answer when we do voice of customer research. We just call. We call current customers. We call inactive customers. We call people that you've quoted but did not win. And we just ask them a series of questions. And very quickly, we're going to get some insights. And the number one reason I think that buyers are not seeing a lot of value, and it's so hard to get meetings, it's harder to get people engaged, is salespeople that have been behaving badly for so long. What percent of your sales team today has the right skills, motivations, and beliefs to achieve your sales growth plan? What do you think that number is? I ask this question whenever I speak. We had a number of CROs in the audience last week in San Diego, and the number is pretty consistent. What do you think in your company or other companies would say? You know, do you have 100%? Mark, we've got a team, it's aligned, we've got a bunch of rock stars. I don't even know why you're asking this question, or would it be E? I don't know, but I probably should. That actually came out of a break one time after a session. A CEO came up to me over coffee and said, you know, that's a great question. I don't have the answer, but I wish I did. What are you guessing? What are we seeing in the chat?
We're seeing B. We're seeing E. I'm curious, yeah. Mark, like who does the research on this?
I have one of the assessment instruments that I use is from the Objective Management Group. They've been doing these assessments for over, I believe, 30 years. They've assessed over 2.5 million salespeople globally. And as one of their coaches, I can go in and ask the tool a lot of questions. Overall, the answer is about 30%. 30% of my team has what it takes to hit the plan. I feel really confident about that. 70% are in some level of skill mastery. Typically, CEOs will even agree what the data tells us. It actually validates what they believe sometimes. About 25% of my team really needs some help. Let's just think for a minute. Okay, we've got 96% of CEOs saying we're going to have a recession. Only 14% have a plan. And of those CEOs, only 30% of their teams have the skills to execute their plans. That sounds like a problem that needs to be solved. People say, well, it's so hard to figure out. Well, again, this is the instrument I use. As a trainer, a big part of my job is figuring out, what does the team need and what does each individual need? This is actually one of the teams I've been helping. Look at their number on closing skills, right? 18 out of 100. So the question is, are your salespeople asking for the order? 67% of salespeople never ask for the order. They feel it's rude. They feel that it'll hurt their relationship. One of the things we look for when we assess salespeople is the need to be liked. Salespeople with a high need to be liked don't ask really good questions, and they rarely ask for the order. But if you need to be respected, you have no problem asking for the order. And when it comes to cash, so you've spent all that money on trips, samples, digital marketing, you've got customers up to the point of a quote, but your salespeople aren't asking for the order. That's a huge challenge. Qualifying continues to be a challenge. Sales technology, quite a few people have CRMs, but they're not using them. And then we were talking very early on before everybody joined, getting back to the basics of consultative selling, right? These are skills that are really lacking today. So if you want your team to stand out, let's figure out where they're at and then train and coach them to improve. And then there's customers. We mentioned, how do we recession proof our revenue, but how do we recession proof customers? The number one thing, if there was a book out called The Power of One Thing, and it tells you, make a list of everything you need to do. And then is there one thing you could do that makes your entire list go away? And my advice would be, call your customers. I'm a scaling up coach. If you haven't read that book, it's fantastic. Another book called The Rockefeller Habits is another wonderful book. But one of the things we recommend is every senior leader call 2 accounts every week and just check in. How are we doing? What are some of your challenges? What are some trends you're seeing? That data is invaluable. But the reality is a lot of teams don't do that, so they hire us to do it. And we'll call anywhere from 50 of your top customers. The biggest project we ever did was 1,300 customers. And we ask them questions. Are they satisfied? What's their buying criteria? Identify defectors before they leave. One of my clients is a machine shop, and it's a very impressive, large machine shop. And when we did voice of customer research, one of their top 3 accounts was getting ready to leave. They were unhappy. They've already found another vendor. But to the credit of this CEO and his team, as soon as he saw the report, he booked a lunch with that person and saved the business. There was just a misunderstanding on how something was handled. And again, that CEO took action. The time saved to save an account is before they leave, not after. What's your share of wallet? I love this question. When I ask salespeople, what's your share of wallet with this particular account or this dealer? Oh, Mark, I've got it all. Or, oh, wow, we've got 70%. The reality is, in most cases, you probably have 22 to 30%. There's a tremendous opportunity for growth, just growing with your current accounts. They already know you, they trust you, or they wouldn't be working with you. But unfortunately, a lot of sales teams are out chasing shiny objects, trying to win new business. And then identify unmet needs. Real power comes out of voice of customer research when we identify needs like, with the slowdown in the economy, one of my clients makes bolts and fasteners. And when we spoke to their buyers, they just said, look, we're getting a lot of pressure to have just-in-time inventory. And my client didn't have a just-in-time inventory pricing model. So we created one. And their sales are really strong right now. So again, just take some time, whether you hire somebody to do it or whether you do it yourself. Also, I have an ebook on it. You can go to my website. It's free to download on how to do voice of customer research. Who on your team should never do voice of customer research? Your salesperson. Why is that? They have a relationship with that person. You're not going to get honest feedback that's going to deliver insights. What do we want to know about our customers? Why do they buy from you? It's funny. When I was in San Diego speaking, I mentioned voice of customer research, and somebody said, wow, we always ask why we didn't get the order, but we never ask why we did. One of my clients made vehicles for people in wheelchairs to be able to drive again. And when we did voice of customer research, we asked that question, why did you buy their vehicle? And the resounding answer was it was the quietest vehicle in the industry. Because if you're familiar with these vehicles, they have a ramp so that person in a wheelchair can go up into the vehicle. And traditionally, the ramp was on the inside. And when you're driving, the ramp is rattling and you can't even hear the radio, let alone have a conversation. But my client had a ramp that disappeared into the floor. Nowhere in their marketing, on their website, was anything about quiet vehicle. We actually turned that into a campaign along with some other strategies. And that company grew, I want to say from 15 million, it took 6 years, to 90 million. Why don't customers buy from you? Some of the best calls we have are with customers that didn't buy. They're very, let's just say, brutally honest. What's their buying process today? And what criteria do they need today? Again, you'd be shocked. Sometimes you assume sales knows what it is, but it's changing all the time. So it's a good thing to understand. And then your structure, focus on customers and employee retention. We need to improve the buying experience. And a simple way to do that, again, a human-to-human approach, is just to ask the buyer a question. Where are you at in your buying process? The quickest way for us to be seen as a pushy salesperson is to be trying to close the sale when the buyer's just educating themselves or they're just trying to find solutions, right? We recommend we segment our accounts, A, B, and C accounts, and then make sure we have the right terms of trade. You know, people kind of tease me a little bit, but when it comes to the CRM, we even spell out an A account gets X amount of meetings per month per quarter. A B account gets X amount of meetings per quarter. A C account gets 1 meeting per year, maybe 1 or 2 calls per quarter. We got to make sure we're spending our money where we get the greatest return. And then key account development plans. This is where we meet with our accounts and collaboratively build these key account plans and then monitor them and adjust them as needed. Make sure that you have the right sales structure. We just did voice of customer research for a very large distributor in the HVAC business. And what we found was their customers actually preferred virtual sales to face-to-face. So we restructured and we actually flip-flopped. What they had was 60% outside sales, 40% inside. So now what we've done is we've put 60% inside, and the people that go outside, the 40%, are more like technical specialists. They're doing both virtual as well as outside. And then measure what matters. I've been spending quite a bit of time as people adjust for the new economy on key performance indicators. You know, what's a lagging indicator versus what's a leading indicator? Let's just make sure we measure what matters and we talk about it. And then there's marketing. When I talk to CEOs, which again, that's my ideal customer persona, is the CEO. And, you know, maybe it's over a beer, but they say, look, you know, I know marketing's important and about 50% of the marketing we do generates a return. And then there's 50% that doesn't. I just don't know which is which. We can figure that out with some voice of customer research. The technology exists today to see activity based on different marketing strategies. We need to understand our buyers' journeys today and then their personas. If you haven't heard this term, probably everybody on the call has, but, you know, a persona is, you know, we even name them, you know, different roles and different needs that different decision makers have at your accounts. My person in the bolts and fasteners does a lot of work with quality managers, and they speak in terms of parts per million and not needing to sort parts. A CEO is talking about vision and EBITDA. You know, the CFO might be focused on cost reduction. So what we do is we take that value proposition that you have for your business, but then modify it in the language of the person that you're speaking with. What criteria, what keywords and phrases are people using? Again, the science behind this is so impressive today. And then invest in your digital footprint. One of the things we've been doing as of late here is doing a digital footprint audit. You know, and what we're finding is, you know, some people have really invested in CEOs so customers find them, but then some websites are just virtual brochures. It's, not driving any traffic whatsoever. Their bounce rates are over 90%. They're really not the tool for lead gen that they need to be. So again, take a hard look at your marketing and then your costs. Obviously, we got to understand our costs. And as we grow, one of the things, not only does our business get more complex, but we sometimes lose track of some of our costs. And then we need to assess the skills and implement top grading. A great book, if you haven't read it, is called Top Grading. It's where, how do I get a team of A players, right? That's what everybody wants and needs. We assess individual skills, we identify and close gaps. And if we have somebody that maybe is very skilled, but isn't a cultural fit, we need to get rid of them right away. Because I have a picture on LinkedIn I posted, a bowl of fruit, and one of the pieces of fruit had gone rotten, and all of a sudden all the fruit around it started getting rotten. One of the worst mistakes we can make as business leaders is to keep somebody on our team that produces but isn't a good cultural fit. The way they produce creates disruption and disharmony and actually decreases motivation. So again, and then there's the 20% rule, which is, again, 20% of your customers represent a huge portion, if not greater, of your profits. So if you haven't seen it before, there is a tool by Cash Flow Story is the name of the company that all scaling up coaches have. And we just take a look at all the different levers, we import your data, and then we ask it questions. For example, we call it the power of one. What if we just increased your prices 1%, increased your sales volume 1%, 1% direct cost reduction, 1% reduction in overhead, 1% improvement in accounts receivable, 1% reduction in your work in process, and 1% increase in payable days? For this particular client, they would have an $867,000 impact on cash and a $979,000 impact on profit. So as we build these plans, as we look at what are some of the trigger events, we need to take into account some of these levers that we can pull. Maybe a 1% price increase is too conservative for you. Maybe you can get, bigger cost reductions. But all we're saying is let's put a plan in place and let's measure our activity. The teams that succeeded in the last recession and not only grew, but grew on average 9%, they met often and they talked about their plans. If their plan wasn't working, they gathered these new insights that I call learnings, and they adjusted. They had frequent meetings, whether they're daily huddles, definitely weekly, definitely quarterly. Quarterly meetings are usually spent on solving particularly big challenges. Weekly and monthly meetings are all about, keeping on pace and improving our overall accountability. And then somebody, whenever I deliver this, says this either in the hallway or in the conversation itself, Mark, what if the economy doesn't slow down? Boy, this sounds like an awful lot of work. This could be a tremendous waste of time, energy, and people. I don't ever think it's a waste of time to run your business profitably, right? What people often hire our team to do is to improve their profit, improve their revenue, and more importantly, improve their shareholder value. But if you take these steps, what you're going to find is you're going to see an increase in your profits, particularly if you focus on profit pricing as well as those profit leaking accounts. You're going to have a much more engaged and focused team, which improves morale and retention. You're going to increase your market share. You're going to reduce the cost of sale and ideally have the right terms of trade for each one of your accounts. You're going to improve your overall sales effectiveness because now you know where those skills gaps are, and you're going to do training and coaching, maybe supply some new systems and processes and tools, and your overall customer satisfaction and experience is going to improve. So that's why we emphasized the steps that we mentioned. Consistently, accounts that are implementing these steps are seeing these kind of results, and there's no reason why your team can as well. The big thing to remember, though, is the teams that acted quickly and decisively early outperformed those that waited and reacted. You can read the articles. McKinsey's done articles on this. I've lived through a couple of recessions, so I know this to be true. My client that I was serving at the time of a recession was one of the largest product management training companies in the world. They had trained over 80,000 vice presidents of product management globally. And when the recession hit, sales, dropped about, I want to say, about 30 to 60%, depending upon the month. And we followed these steps. We called all the customers. We found out what changed. For example, in that industry, one of our key personas was HR managers. And we found that the HR managers lost their budgets. And we were at the mercy of HR managers selling up through the leadership team to the CEO and CFO to get budget. So once we learned that, we created a quick slide deck for the HR managers. We changed our sales process so that the CEO and CFO could speak with one of our trainers. And within 6 months, not only did we get back to normal, we actually saw a 25% increase. And that continued long after the recession was over. So again, the 7 levers that you have to improve profit, cash flow, and business value is the price, sales volume, cost of goods, overhead, accounts receivable, inventory and WIP, and accounts payable. People tell me, this sounds so simple. The reason why my website's called No Smoke and Mirrors is I've been doing this just short of 40 years. I try to put in simple things that just work. They're not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. It's going to take a lot of discipline and a lot of work, but they work. You're going to see an improvement in the value of your business. I love this quote by the race car driver. He says, you can't overtake 15 cars in sunny weather, but you can when it's raining. Well, for a lot of your markets, it's going to start raining. So why not be that race car that passes everybody in the turn? When the economy turns, your team is going to accelerate and grow. The other thing I added, again, as a coach for scaling up, we have an assessment instrument where you can go in and very quickly assess. There's 4 key areas that drive your business: people, cash, sales, and overall strategy, also execution. So I've got a free link here. If you want to come in and take that, you'll get a report instantly. And then if you'd like to chat with me about how do you improve your overall report, what are some things you're seeing in your markets today, and how can I help you?
My quick question, whilst others might be thinking of their question, why are so few executives putting plans in place? Why is it only 14%?
Depending upon the leadership team and the culture of the team. Some teams believe that their current plan is brilliant and all we need to do is work harder. They're not familiar with adjusting, and a lot of their plans are built based on when they were in, customer-facing roles. So again, that's a struggle, which is hubris. The other is they haven't felt it yet. They really don't have a good feeling on what the future looks like. One of the webinars I did recently was, how do we get CFOs and VPs of sales to work closer? And when we surveyed, I think it was over 3,000 CFOs, we asked them, when a sales VP gives you a forecast, how much do you discount it? Because they don't believe in the forecast. They don't believe what's in the CRM. They don't even believe what's in your ERP system. And the average was about 30%. So they really don't have a good pulse on
Kind of a grasp on the business.
Leading indicators. They've got a great pulse on lagging indicators.
Yeah.
What most CEOs are really hungry for right now is trends. What's happening? What trend can I take advantage of? What trend is a threat? And how do we adapt to that? They're counting on their senior leaders to have a pulse on that, right? The CEO's most important role is vision and growing the business. They count on their senior leadership team to know those things. And again, sometimes people are so busy in the business, they're not working on the business.
We have a question in the chat, Mark. Since the pandemic, we've noticed, and this is specifically to events, we've noticed that planning is much shorter, even last minute compared to pre-pandemic. Do you see that in other sectors?
Yeah, depending upon the event. If it's a huge industry event like the SAMA event last week, that was planned a year in advance. However, what I'm seeing, and I've even had to adjust to, are, hey, Mark, we're having a sales kickoff meeting next month. Well, what do you mean next month? Well, just what we said. We've decided we want to get the team together. The team hasn't been together in 3 years, and can you show up with about like 3 weeks notice? So I've had to adjust the way I do business. Yes, this is happening, particularly when it comes to sales kickoff meetings, sales meetings, and some trade events. I was just invited to speak at a trade event in Cleveland. Normally, I would have had at least a quarter, 3 months to prepare, and I've got less than a month. So yes, this is a trend, and unfortunately, I think we're going to have to adapt to it.
And what about outside of events, just normal day-to-day business? Do you see this last-minute planning more post-pandemic than we used to pre-pandemic?
Yeah, I think what we did going into the pandemic is the businesses that have a business plan, they might have spent 2 to 3 days off-site, on Mount High with their leaders, figuring out what they want their business to look like, which is great. But the only time they looked at the plan was when they were working on it, and now it's sitting in a binder on their shelf, collecting dust, or they don't have a plan. And those are the folks that we really are trying to help right now. Even if the plan isn't perfect, have a plan. As a scaling up coach, we use a one-page plan. A one-page plan people don't put on a shelf somewhere. It's in front of them all the time. It's very easy to follow. You clearly understand what needs to happen and what you need to do. And everybody on your team needs to understand what they're expected to do. So yeah, I'm seeing a lot shorter time frame on everything. Again, there's some articles, there's a couple that I've written, there's some videos. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Again, I try to answer everybody's questions within 48 hours. And again, I've got so much content. I'd be surprised if you were facing a challenge that we didn't face. And again, thank you for inviting me to be on this webinar today. And again, if we have a plan and our teams are trained and they have the skills to execute, you can be one of those 14% of companies that grow even when the economy slows down.
Amazing. Mark, thank you so much. You did indeed deliver the really practical things that you said in the beginning you would. Personally, I found that very insightful. Lots of great insights there, practical things that we should all be doing, whether we're small or large businesses. It's applicable to all of us, right?
Absolutely. And definitely cash, and definitely understanding your customer.
Amazing. Thank you, folks, for joining. We appreciate you hanging in there with us. Do join us next week for our next webinar, where we will be talking about books as a business and how you can start writing a book and leverage it as a tool to increase your brand. So, folks, thank you for joining. We will be making these recordings available to those of you in the coming weeks. We look forward to hopefully seeing you in our future webinars.